Welcome, class, to today's Explainer. I'm your host and resident economist, and today we're jumping right into a masterclass on the mechanics of global currency fluctuations. Let's just get right to it. The foreign exchange, or Forex, market is the absolute engine driving global trade. It is literally the lifeblood of international economics. Without it, buying a foreign car, importing overseas tech, or even just selling your local crops to the other side of the planet would be completely impossible.
So, here's our roadmap for the day. We'll kick things off with Forex basics, then move into the mechanics of floating rates. From there, we'll look at trade, inflation, and profitability before pivoting over to fixed rates and foreign reserves. Finally, we'll wrap up with the balance of payments.
All right, part one. Welcome to Forex economics. Think of the foreign exchange market as this invisible, absolutely necessary bridge in a world where everyone is using entirely different national currencies.
So what exactly is this bridge?
Well, formally, the Forex market is just a situation where the currency of one country is traded for that of another. And, just like any other market you interact with, it's totally driven by buyers and sellers. It runs on those classic, fundamental economic forces of supply and demand.
But how do we actually figure out value here? Well, you have to look at it in two ways. First, you've got the nominal exchange rate. This is just how much foreign currency you get for 1 unit of your domestic currency. It's literally just the sticker price you see flashing on the screen at your bank. But the real exchange rate, that is the one that actually matters to your wallet. It's your true purchasing power. It measures how much of your domestic goods can actually be swapped for foreign goods. Always remember, the real rate is what dictates your actual buying power on the global stage.
And this visual perfectly captures how the whole machine connects. We're using a really classic example here, swapping Fiji sugar for UK machine tools. Notice how the physical goods are flowing across the top and bottom, right? Meanwhile, the actual currencies, the Fiji dollars and the British pounds, are flowing in the exact opposite direction right through the center. Everything funnels through the Forex market.
It's a continuous loop. Let's break it down. Step 1. Fiji sends its sugar to the UK, and by doing that, they earn British pounds. Step 2, the UK exports their machine tools down to Fiji, and obviously, they want to be paid in those pounds. So step 3, the Forex market steps in to facilitate swapping those Fiji dollars and UK pounds to clear the transactions. It's just a seamless, ongoing cycle of money and goods crossing borders.
Okay, let's transition to section 2, the mechanics of floating rates. We know the market exists, but how are these currency prices actually set when we just leave it all up to the free market? When you leave a currency completely alone, we call that a clean float. It's pure. The value is dictated purely by free market supply and demand, zero interference. But let's be real, most governments don't actually like giving up that much control, so they use what's called a managed, or kind of playfully, a dirty float. It's mostly market-driven, but the government steps in every now and then to smooth out any extreme, chaotic fluctuations and keep things in a safe, predictable range.
Let's look at a pure free market in action, using Fiji's currency as our model. Honestly, this works exactly like buying apples at your local farmer's market. You've got your red supply line, your green demand line, and right where they cross, boom, that is our magic point of equilibrium.
But you really need to understand who is actually creating these lines. The demand for a currency, that comes from foreigners who need to buy your exports, plus global speculators trying to turn a profit. The supply side is driven by your own domestic need to buy foreign imports. So that equilibrium point right in the middle is the exact price where the currency needs of the exporters and the importers perfectly match up.
Let's shift gears to section 3, trade, inflation, and profitability. This is where we take all this high-level macro theory and directly connect it to your wallet and your business. I want you to treat this matrix like your ultimate cheat sheet. When your currency appreciates, meaning it gets stronger, your exports suddenly become way more expensive for the rest of the world. But hey, that dream vacation to Paris? Suddenly a total bargain. Now flip it. If your currency depreciates or loses value, the exact opposite happens. Your exports get super cheap and competitive globally, but buying imported goods or taking that overseas trip becomes painfully expensive.
And you can see that dual effect playing out on a macro scale right here. When the currency depreciates, say dropping from 47 cents to 35 cents, it makes exports super competitive, which shifts the supply line. But at the same time, it crushes the demand for importing those now pricey foreign goods. The net result? Imports drop, exports rise, and your nation's overall net exports see a massive boost.
But look, it's definitely not all upside.
Currency volatility is an absolute nightmare for business planning. A sudden swing in exchange rates can literally wipe out your entire profit margin overnight. Plus, depreciation causes inflation. First, you get primary inflation because finished imported goods cost more at the store. But then you get secondary inflation because the raw materials your local factories use suddenly cost more to import, so they have to raise their prices too. You are effectively importing inflation right into your own backyard.
So knowing all that, the volatility, the inflation risks, the threat to profits, it begs a pretty massive question. What happens when a government just outright refuses to let the free market dictate the value of its money?
And that takes us perfectly into Section 4, fixed rates and foreign reserves. This is a completely different, highly controlled way of running an economy.
Under a fixed exchange rate, the currency's value is officially locked in and rigidly enforced by the government or central bank. But how do they actually fight off the natural forces of global trade to keep it there? They use foreign reserves. These are massive stockpiles of foreign currencies that the central bank hoards. It's essentially their war chest, used to actively intervene in the market and maintain that fixed price, especially when the economy gets rocky.
The mechanics of this are just fascinating. Look at this setup. The government has fixed the rate at 70 cents, which is artificially high, right? The natural market equilibrium is way down at 50 cents. So to keep the price propped up at 70, the central bank has to jump into the market and use its foreign reserves to constantly buy up its own currency. They have to artificially inflate the demand to hold that line.
Oh, and a very quick terminology check for your notes, because people get this wrong all the time. When we're talking about fixed exchange rates, we use specific words. Revaluation is when the government deliberately and officially increases the currency's value. Devaluation is when they deliberately decrease it. Remember, you only use these terms for intentional government actions under fixed regimes. If a floating currency drops, it's depreciating, not devaluing.
All right, final stop on our syllabus today, Section 5, the balance of payments. Let's tie these currency systems back to the nation's ultimate macroeconomic checkbook. I always tell my students to think of a floating system like a car with incredible shock absorbers. Any bumps in the road are naturally smoothed out because the exchange rate itself moves. It literally self-heals. But a fixed-rate system, that's like driving a rigid wooden carriage with zero suspension. Because the rate is locked and can't absorb the shock, the government feels every bump. Their constant intervention means the country is almost always sitting in an artificial surplus or deficit. And fighting that constant disequilibrium requires some pretty extreme domestic policy. Defending a fixed rate totally dictates how many international reserves a country has to hoard. If those reserves start drying up, the government might have to aggressively cap imports. Even wilder, if you have a surplus, the central bank is forced to buy foreign currency, which pumps more domestic money into your economy. If you have a deficit, they have to sell reserves, which literally shrinks your domestic money supply. By forcing a fixed rate, you're directly manipulating the actual amount of cash floating around your own country. Which leaves us with one final, pretty profound question to wrap up today. Think about it. Is the comfort of a fixed, predictable exchange rate really worth the massive cost of constantly fighting the free market, draining your foreign reserves, and messing with your own domestic money supply? It is the ultimate trade-off between currency certainty and free market efficiency. Definitely something to chew on. All right, thank you for joining today's explainer class. Keep analyzing those markets, and we'll see you next time.